recorded. It's the place for the Family Feud, weeknights at 6:30.
I'm Pat Jorgensen from Chicago, Illinois. Good morning, America.
Earmuffs. Earmuffs. 80 below in Chicago. Good morning, everybody. I'm David Hartman and Joan London. Tuesday, 12th of January. And coming up in this hour, we're going to talk about money. President Reagan is opposed to increasing taxes, as I'm sure you know, or imposing any new taxes. He believes that the principle of what is now called supply-side economics demands that taxes be lowered, no matter what. But the fundamentals of supply-side economics are now being battered by a huge deficit in the federal budget. Some people say it's going to run over $100 billion. Many advisors and many members of Congress are saying to the president that the budget deficit is simply too large. The only way to cut it is through some form of taxation. In a few minutes, we'll talk with two men who, by reputation and position, have a lot of influence over what the president is thinking. They are Congressman Jim Jones and Congressman Jack Kemp. They're on opposite sides.
The Blaze.
After 7 right now, and right now it looks like the 1982 federal budget deficit could reach nearly $100 billion. That's more than twice as much as President Reagan and his advisors were predicting earlier. The president's top advisors, as well as many Republican leaders in Congress, think that some new taxes are needed to hold that deficit down. So far, the president has opposed the idea. Congressman James Jones is a Democrat from Oklahoma. He's chairman of the House Budget Committee. He's joining us from our ABC station this morning, Wichita, Kansas. That's KAKE-TV. And Congressman Jack Kemp, Republican from New York. He's against the new taxes, and he's in Washington with Steve Bell. Gentlemen, good morning. Welcome back.
Good morning.
Good morning, David. Good morning, Congressman. Congressman Kemp, we know that the president's opposed to imposing new taxes or raising taxes in any way. Yet Bob Michael, Congressman Michael, said yesterday that the president is starting to face up to the realities. Can you tell us anything new this morning? Do you think it's possible that the president will make the decision to either impose some kind of new taxes or raise some in some way?
Well, I think it's possible, but I don't think it's probable. When we talk about reality, one of the realities is that this country does face higher taxes. We had a higher tax in 1981, and very frankly, I think the president recognizes that whether you talk about income taxes or taxes on consumption, those are taxes that remove the ability of people to make decisions over the fruits of their own labor. And I don't think he wants to raise taxes. I think he recognizes as well that for the past 4 years, we've had a significant increase in taxes, and the deficit didn't go down, it went up, and interest rates didn't go down, they went up, and inflation continued right along. So as far as I'm concerned, it's my belief that the president is going to overrule the advice that he's getting from some of our Democratic friends as well as Republicans, and will oppose any new taxes.
But you,
as a good Republican, how can Republican Jack Kemp, conservative from New York, look at a $100,000 budget projection and not want to do something like raise taxes?
$100 million. Yeah, go ahead.
$100 billion, right.
Yes.
You know, President John F. Kennedy one time said in similar circumstances, although faced with lower deficits, he made the comment that there are two kinds of deficits. There's a deficit that is the result of inertia in the economy. In other words, the slow rate of economic growth, which reduces expenditures and reduces revenues and raises expenditures. And then he said there's a temporary deficit that is the result of a tax policy designed to encourage economic growth. And as far as I'm concerned, this current deficit is the result of the recession. 80% of the deficit figures are recession-oriented. That is, reduction of revenues and an increase in expenditures and unemployment. And frankly, you don't raise taxes either on income or production or consumption in a recession. And that's what Margaret Thatcher tried to do. It didn't work. And frankly, I think the president, as I said before, is going to reject this advice.
Congressman Jones out in Wichita this morning. Do you agree with Congressman Kemp? Don't raise taxes. You're going to further hurt the economy and make it worse?
Well, the problem you're going to have, David, is you're going to have a tax increase whichever way you go. The tax increase that worries me most is the tax increase of very high interest rates and high inflation, which will also create a stagnant economy. It seems to me that we cannot continue to live beyond our means. If you have your own personal checking account, someday you have to make that checkbook balance, and the same is true for nations. The problem we have is not a temporary imbalance of the budgets, but what we look at in the foreseeable future is very large federal deficits, and that simply is going to slow down economic growth. It's going to keep long-term interest rates high. It's going to keep mortgage rates high, and those are not just statistics. What those are taxes, effective high taxes that prevent couples from buying homes, that prevent people from buying automobiles, that prevent the small businessman from borrowing to expand his own business. And to me, you've got to get those deficits down, you've got to get interest rates down, otherwise the tax is even, the hidden tax of high interest rates and inflation is even worse than a temporary tax increase.
Congressman, what's your prescription?
Well, I think you have to continue cutting spending, but in doing so, you have to look at all parts of the budget. The Pentagon cannot be immune from spending cuts as they were last year and continue to spend merrily along their way. But in addition to that, after you've cut the spending, all that the President's asked and all that we've looked for, I think you're still going to have to raise enough revenues to eventually be able to balance the budget.
How?
Well, there are a whole range of ways to do it, and the President will, of course, be the key to this. But you can, say, postpone the third step of the tax cut that was scheduled for 1983 if the deficits are not down and if certain economic conditions are not achieved. Another thing is the so-called consumption taxes, and I know the administration is looking at excise taxes. They're looking at import fees on oil. And a third thing that I don't think you can overlook, and you might even call it a national security surtax or some sort, and that is a temporary tax to pay for these enormous buildup in military expenditures. If that buildup is necessary, it seems to me we have to pay for it somehow.
Congressman Kemp, you were shaking your head no just then, listening to Congressman Jones, specifically to...
Well, we've been through this so many times before. President Johnson put a surtax on income of 10% in 1968, and it was kept on by President Nixon in 1969, and the deficit didn't go down, it went up as it became a drag on the economy. No, the whole point, let me just finish my statement, that surtax didn't work, and we just came through 4 years of Jimmy Carter's attempt to try to balance the budget. The deficit went from $25 billion in 1976 to over $60 billion, which would be, in 1982 dollars, it would be close to $100 billion in 1980. So we've had several years of experimenting with the idea that you can raise taxes to reduce the deficit. And the only point that I'm trying to make, and made yesterday at the White House, is that the deficit today, A, is a result of recession in large part, and B, the high interest rates, of which I am also concerned about, because inflation, as Jim Jones, and interest rates, as Jim Jones has said, are also a tax on the productive sector, but these are a monetary phenomenon. We're seeing a breakdown in the monetary policy of this country because the dollar is not trusted, is not credible, and it will not maintain its value over a long period of time.
Excuse me, Congressman Kemp,
you don't have a bond market in this country. 40
seconds, Congressman Jones, go ahead.
Well, I don't think we can revise history. As far as the surtax is concerned, the problem that most people agree is it was not placed on there soon enough and it was taken off precipitously. It did give us a balanced budget, the only balanced budget we've had in over 25 years. But we have a classic situation in this country today because of these economic policies of guns and butter. And if we're going to provide for both guns and butter, we're going to have to pay for them. You can't simply go on living beyond your means. And one of the biggest problems in the monetary policy is the fact that the fiscal policy has gone very expansionary while monetary policy is strict, and that's high interest rates, and that's going to slow down the economy.
Congressman Jones, Congressman Kemp, thank you.
Thank you.